Every thrust of a pitchfork deep into the soil to dig up potatoes is silently wearing away your cartilage. I've watched friends spend thousands on spinal therapy because of that motion. But for 15 years, my harvest has taken exactly 3 seconds. No digging, no back pain, just a simple tip of the hands. And the secret isn't a new tool. It's a breathable fabric bag that tricks the roots into doing all the hard work. Hello, gardening friends in search of peace. The stillness of autumn always brings the earthy scent of humus and a chill over the fallen leaves. Harvesting potatoes has long been the most anticipated moment of the year. But let's be honest, for many of us, especially as our hair turns gray and our knees aren't as flexible as they were in our 20s, potato harvesting season inadvertently brings a lingering physical dread. I still vividly remember the harvest afternoons from a decade ago, my lower back aching and exhausted, both knees kneeling on the damp earth, using the strength of my shoulders and arms to pry up stiff clods of clay. So many of my friends have traded their health, spending small fortunes on spinal physical therapy just because of this deeply ingrained habit. Gardening in our later years, after all, should be a physical soothing, not a chore that drains the little energy we have left. That is why, for years now, my garden has been completely absent of pitchforks, pickaxes, or any heavy metal tools. Instead of having to hunch over and dig the soil every autumn, this method of growing potatoes in grow bags not only saves your lower back, but also locks in all the life inside. It preserves the original humus ecosystem, helping you escape the cycle of constantly spending money on expensive fertilizers and soils for the next. There is another deeply heartbreaking thing that anyone who digs in open trenches understands. It is that dry, sudden crunch when the hoe blade accidentally slices through the largest, most beautiful potato that nature took months to crystallize. Those scarred potatoes will spoil very quickly. They cannot sit quietly in the root cellar through the winter, forcing us to once again face exorbitant grocery bills at the store. Now my harvesting motion is as gentle and intact as tipping a basket of fruit. We simply pour it out and pick up the gift that Mother Earth has wrapped for us. Not a single drop of sweat wasted, nor any disruption to the lifeline beneath our feet. But for those potatoes to freely swell, roundly filling the space inside the bag, without us having to dig, we need to understand a hidden language of the young roots. Let's look deep into the structure of the earth together. For generations, we have always assumed that plant roots needed to be buried in dense, sealed beds of soil. But the science of plant physiology tells me a completely different story, especially for plants carrying life underground like potatoes. If you have ever flipped a plastic plant pot upside down to repot it, you've surely seen those long roots coiled and tangled around each other at the bottom. They are imprisoned, suffocated, and squeezing out their own living space. Underneath those compacted clay beds out in the garden, your potatoes are struggling in a similar situation. They spend far too much biological energy just trying to drill through the hard soil, instead of using that precious energy to grow the tubers. That is when the magic of breathable grow bags comes. It is not a lifeless layer of plastic or a rigid physical barrier. The fabric of the bag is actually a delicate air filter. When the potato roots stretch out and touch the boundary of this porous fabric, the natural outside air dries and automatically disables the young root tips. This brilliant mechanism is called air pruning by biologists. Instead of continuing to stretch out and coil in despair, the potato plant receives a smart survival signal. It immediately triggers the growth of thousands of tiny feeder roots, intricately weaving a network that spreads throughout the entire root ball. This network helps the plant exhaustively absorb every drop of dew and every hidden mineral. This optimization is the key to why you never have to waste money on expensive inorganic fertilizers. Your plant naturally knows how to extract maximum nutrition from what it is holding on to. But a healthy root network is only half the story. The other half lies in the very material nourishing them. Potatoes do not grow the way other plants extend branches. They swell. This swelling process into tubers requires empty space and an incredibly abundant amount of oxygen. If the soil is too heavy and sticky, the tubers will be squeezed and deformed. For a leisurely harvest in the autumn, the soil preparation in the spring must be truly gentle. I don't use ordinary topsoil for this method. My hands prefer to be buried in a loose, feather-light mixture, something I often call pockets of life. My ratio is very rustic and completely inexpensive. Cocoa coir to retain moisture while creating porosity, a bit of decomposed sawdust to maintain structure, and the indispensable ingredient is the fallen dry leaves from the garden from last autumn. When we mix them with our bare hands, we are manually creating millions of tiny oxygen pockets. The soil is so loose that the young potatoes just gently push the organic fibers aside to swell, meeting absolutely no resistance. And you see, when the soil doesn't resist the plant, you don't need to bring out a hoe and shovel to break that resistance at the end of the season. All the heavy digging effort has been eliminated from the very moment you drop the first handful of mulch into the bottom of the bag. An effortless arrangement, yet it brings a legacy of peace to your joints for months to come. When the roots have found their empty space and an abundant supply of oxygen to breathe, our next challenge comes from above the ground. Light and temperature. By nature, potatoes are creatures of the dark. If a young potato tuber accidentally breaches the soil surface and is touched by the sun's rays, an automatic biological defense mechanism is immediately triggered. The plant will naturally produce solanine, a natural alkaloid that causes the skin to turn green. That is nature's clever way of protecting the tuber from being eaten by insects and wildlife when exposed. But for humans, solanine gives a bitter taste and can cause discomfort if consumed in large amounts. So we simply keep the tubers covered. To deal with this phenomenon of tubers pushing up to the surface, traditional gardeners had to invent a technique called hilling, or trenching. Every few weeks, as the potato plants grow taller, they have to carry a shovel out to the garden, bracing themselves to scoop up heavy, clunky clay from the furrows, mounding it high around the base of the plants to block out the light. But when we shift the garden into grow bags, the rule of darkness is reestablished in an incredibly gentle way. As the potato shoots grow tall, instead of hunching over to hoe the soil, I simply grab a small bucket filled with feather-light sawdust, dried straw, or the decomposed fallen leaves scattered around the corners of the garden. I slowly and lightly sprinkle them into the grow bag, covering around the base of the plant until only the very top tuft of leaves is exposed. The work of shielding potatoes from the light now requires absolutely no exertion. It is as gentle as sprinkling a layer of grated cheese over the top of a baked pie. This is the moment you realize the value of financial independence in the garden. You don't have to open your wallet to buy expensive bags of specialty healing soil at the supply store. Any loose agricultural waste that has good light-blocking capabilities and is free around the house can be reused into a perfect protective shield. A quiet, unobtrusive, inflation-proof solution that is effective down to every single penny. Darkness has been secured, but within that darkness lies another invisible enemy often forgotten: the oppression of heat. Plant physiology studies have proven a strict truth. The process of potato tuber formation will completely halt when the temperature of the soil environment crosses the threshold of 27 degrees Celsius. If you plant in sealed plastic pots or mound trenches exposed to the scorching July sun, the soil inside can be silently boiled. At that point, the plant goes into heat shock. It stops pushing nutrients down to the roots to create tubers and redirects all its survival energy just to keep the leaves from wilting. That is why I am always grateful for the presence of this geotextile fabric. If you have ever touched a terracotta clay water jug on a sweltering summer afternoon, you will notice its surface is always cool to the touch. Grow bags operate on exactly the same principle of micro-evaporation. Through millions of microscopic pores on the walls of the bag, excess moisture inside is continuously permeated and evaporated out into the air. This process of releasing moisture carries away heat, continuously cooling the soil mass inside. No matter how stifling the surrounding air might be, your young potatoes are still resting in an incredibly cool and dark microclimate. We do not use chemicals to force the plant to produce tubers. We also do not need to use our physical strength to dig and shield them. We simply provide nature with exactly what it needs: porosity, darkness, and coolness, and then step back, taking that time to sip a cup of tea and letting water and air finish the rest of the work. When the last rays of the afternoon sun begin to turn amber, the most anticipated moment of the entire season truly arrives. My harvesting process no longer begins with the harsh clashing of metal against gravel, but just a soft rustling sound as the plastic tarp is spread out on the grass. With just a simple tilt of the hand, the entire little world that has been nurtured for the past 4 months pours out. Plump, golden potatoes with tight skin, flawlessly clean, roll tumbling onto the tarp. But if you look closely into the pile of loose humus just poured out, you will see the true greatness of this method doesn't just lie in the potatoes. It lies in the tiny creatures looking around, slithering through the damp earth. When we use pitchforks or pickaxes to harvest in large trenches the industrial way, we are inadvertently creating a terrible devastation underground. That cold metal blade has no eyes. It slices through precious potatoes, but more heartbreakingly, it cleaves through the earthworms diligently plowing the soil, destroys wild ground bee nests, and shreds the newly woven network of symbiotic fungal thread. But when we harvest by tipping the grow bag like this, everything is kept intact. Every life is respected. Fat earthworms fall out along with the root ball, completely unharmed. I often use my bare hands to gently pick them up and place them back into the family compost bin. There, they will continue their mission of decomposition for a new cycle. A truly healthy garden must be a safe place for all species, even the smallest creatures hidden beneath the mud. And when speaking of safety, I always think about children. The garden should be a healing classroom where children are free to explore nature with all their senses. It would be incredibly dangerous to let kids run around sharp pitchforks or rusty hoe blades left scattered about after an exhausting harvest. But with this dump and harvest method, there are absolutely no sharp tools present. The humus soil is loose, not sticky. My grandchildren can carefree plop down on the tarp, using their tiny bare hands to wade through the soft cocoa core to search for tiny buried potatoes. For them, it is not labor, but a treasure hunt filled with laughter. Letting children interact with a diverse, safe microbiome in organic soil is also the most natural way to build a robust immune system for them. So after all the potatoes have been picked up, what do we do with the pile of humus left on the tarp? Never throw them away. Growing in isolated bags helps us completely prevent the spread of harmful root knot nematodes from one area to another. The soil you just poured out is now steeped in beneficial bacteria and fungal threads. It is a living entity. I often scoop this humus soil and spread it as a thin blanket over the roots of fruit trees around the garden, or use it to top dress the beds in preparation for the upcoming garlic crop. All the nutrients are retained, not washed away by summer rains like when planted in open beds. This growing mixture brightly continues its second life cycle, helping the garden self-sustain its abundance without ever forcing you to open your wallet to buy another bag of fertilizer or potting soil again. At this point, the empty grow bag has excellently completed its mission. Its resilient material allows us to shake off the dirt, let it dry, and fold it neatly to store away for the next 5 or 6 seasons. Harvesting should not be a battle, but an intelligent enjoyment. And of course, if you have chronic back or joint conditions, please check with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your gardening routine. But you know, even though growing potatoes in bags is incredibly effortless, they are still essentially an annual crop, requiring us to repeat the cycle of planting every time spring arrives. If you truly want to create a tranquil space where the garden runs itself and offers you sweet fruits decade after decade with a number of plantings you can count on one hand, well, nature still holds other long-term secrets. In our next garden stroll, I will share with you 8 forgotten perennial vegetables, plants that you only need to drop into the earth exactly one single time, and they will automatically return to nourish you for years to come. But for now, as the sun slowly sets, I want to listen to the story from your garden. What was the most exhausting physical task or ache you experienced in your garden last harvest season? Let me know in the comments below. Maybe we can figure out a gentler, more healing solution for your lower back together. And if this took the ache out of your harvest, tag a fellow gardener who still fights with a pitchfork every autumn.